This is a recording conducted on August the 26th with Bob and Isabel Hogg between Roberta Haygood and Hurley Haygood. Well, Bob, let me just make a comment here. We're going to have Bob go first in this little interview, and we have asked some questions of Bob. So, Bob, why don't you just start off and give us the information there on some of these questions that we asked you.
Okay. My birthplace is Hannibal, Missouri. Now, I suppose you want the whole date, huh?
Right.
November the 25th, 1893. Parents was Arthur W. and Nanny Pitts Hogg. Grandparents, paternal, John Oliver and Jemima Hogg. Maternal, William R. and Arcadial Pitts. Brothers, Fred Hogg married Rebecca Briscoe. Sister, Frances Hogg Anderson, married Cy Anderson. Now, here's, you ask about our grandparents. So William R. Pitts, I don't know whether Sis gave you this or not, but came to Hannibal sometime in the 1840s. Became an apprentice leather harness maker. Later on owned his own harness and saddle shop. Was also one of the founders of the Farmers Merchants Bank. Also,
you know where that saddle shop was?
Yes.
Whereabouts was it?
It's up on North Main Street where Magnavox is now.
Oh, yeah.
Or Cleany or Magnavox, right in that area.
Second block.
Second block, yeah, because the old Farmers Merchants Bank was a building on the corner.
And they were next to it.
Yes, he was right in that area, yeah.
Wasn't eventually then what was your relative?
Uncle John Ramley.
Remley had a harness shop.
Yeah, Remley did have a harness shop. That was up on North Main Street. And he had a great big horse out there.
Oh, great horse.
A great big horse. I sure remember that. Yeah. And also, my granddad also bought and sold farms and was quite a well-to-do citizen of Hannibal. Now, my grandfather, John Oliver Hogg, my father's father, came to Hannibal around 1859. First worked as a builder of small trestles across the creeks and gullies for the Hannibal and St. Joe Railroad. Later, in the building business, helped build the first police station at 4th and Church Street, also instrumental in helping build the Baptist Church on 5th Street. And Granddad, his specialty was stairways. He was a very fine artist on stairways. And Arthur Hogg, my father, also was a builder, and at one time in partnership with his father in a planing mill. That's down on All Hogg's Road down here in Hannibal. I guess nobody knows where that is anymore.
Now, where is that?
That's down there off of Lemon Street. I think Brown's got his recycling business down in there.
Oh.
And then across on the hill just opposite was Hogg's Hill. And my grandfather and grandmother lived up on top of that hill one time. And during their time up there and their later life, grandmother was instrumental in raising, and she didn't have all of them, but raising about 22 children. Of which Sis and Fred and me were Sis and Fred and me, we were 3 of them, and our cousin Margaret. And then down the line, she was always taking some children in and raising them or getting them started in life.
Kind of taking care of orphans or
yes,
that type of thing?
That's right, yes.
Mostly relatives. Huh? Weren't they mostly relatives?
No, a lot of them are relatives, yes, but then a lot of them are just people that she, well, of course, she had 4 children of her own. Oh, wait a minute, 5 of her own. Uncle Ed, Uncle George, Uncle Jim, and Aunt Margaret, and Dad. That's 5.
Bob, this Hogg's Hill that you talk about, now, if you went out 6th Street, is that...
Oh,
the
you'd
hill?
go down Lemon Street, down out in the west side, down Lemon Street, down by the old, across from the old circus grounds, that hill.
Okay.
Marblehead Lime Company's, their
Where-
plants.
Where the old quarry was? up there?
Yeah, Marblehead Lime Company, yeah.
Okay.
And that's the hill they lived. They lived up on that hill.
I see.
And I guess they came from that hill down and went to their planing mill or something like that. The only reason had this planing mill, and you know, this is getting into the little later part of my program in a way.
Just a
Go
minute.
ahead.
Just 1 second.
Good.
Okay.
Well,
Natural.
now I'm going to tell you about myself.
Okay.
I was born I told you when I was born in Hannibal. Married Isabel Stores on October the 20th, 1923. That's right. 2 children, Robert V. Jr., and now a statistical professor at the University of Iowa, living in Iowa City, Iowa. Mary V. married Richard Stanton, now a retired lieutenant colonel, U.S. Air Force. 3 children, living in Annapolis, Maryland. See, I didn't tell you Bob had 4 children, but he did. He still has
the
them.
names of the grandchildren.
All right.
Now,
Give us the names of the grandchildren. You gave us the number there.
all right, here's Roberts. Mary Carolyn, Barbie Jean, Alan
Well, wait a minute,
Alan Ladd, and Robert Mason. Isn't that it?
Well, you're short on Alan. Last.
Alan-
second name.
middle name.
Well, that was Alan Ladd, wasn't it?
Well, he's got a middle name.
Well, Ladd, Hogg,
Oh, yeah,
Alan.
that's it. That Hogg.
Alan Ladd.
Oh, okay.
And
That's right.
Robert Mason. Oh,
Uh-huh.
that's Bob's children. I can tell you about them, but it'll take a whole book. It really would take you a book because I can brag about those kids. So we won't do it. Now we'll go into Mary Virginia and Richard's children. 3 children, twin boys. James, Michael, Stanton, Jeffrey, Alan Stanton. They're the twins, and they don't look alike at all. Then Susan, Kathleen Stanton. They're the 3 children. All of them are graduated from the University of Maryland. They're all graduated from the University of Maryland. Now, I have here, that follows your program. That's what's about all you want on that, isn't it? Because like I say, I can go on forever on those kids. So I won't. Now I've got here events of childhood.
Okay.
Plenty.
We love it.
Along athletic lines, played baseball and basketball, some track during my high school days. Then, what's that word? Oh, in the wintertime, we used to slide on the various hills around Hannibal. That was before they had automobiles and you could slide without much running into something.
What kind of sled?
Well, I'll tell you about my sleds. We had a single sled, a double sled, and a bobsled. Now the single sled, you rode that by yourself. The double sled, 2 fellows would tie their sleds together and go down belly buster. And one fella in front and the other fella just in behind, hanging on. And then, of course, your bobsleds there were several people, and there were some fellas in town that really had some nice bobsleds.
My brother
And
made one.
George
Those stores made one.
Yeah. And, well, there were several. I can name a dozen hills in town, because you know there's plenty of hills in town.
Name some of the hills.
Maple Avenue was a good fast track. 10th Street was an awful fast track. 7th Street was a long fast track. North Street out here was another track. All over on the south side, we had that Union Street. That was a long fast track. But we didn't like to. We didn't
corners for fear there was a horse and buggy going by.
Oh, every once in a while.
We were always glad to get across.
Well, I ran into Charlie or Brookshank's buggy one time.
What happened?
Well, I just knocked my sled out from under me and rolled me over on the ground. Of course, I'm glad I hit the back wheel. That was down on the corner of Center and 10th. That was a fast track. But we didn't like to go over on the south side much on Union Street because those guys over there would chase us away.
Other side of town.
Yeah,
Other
that,
side of town.
well, Hannibal was divided really into the west side. It was the west side, the central, and the south side, and then there was a little north side, but not too much. But you had to be careful when we central boys went out on the west side or went on the south side. You just had to be careful and like each other a lot. Tell them you liked them. And now, wait a minute, I'm just getting started.
I've never seen.
Well, I did, my school and high school days, I did all that. We did a lot of canoeing on the river. And as,
Just a minute. You mentioned school, but you didn't mention which school. Grade school.
old Hannibal High School. I went to Central School and Hannibal High School.
Where was your home when you were in high school?
I lived out on Center Street, 1014 Center Street.
14 Center. Okay.
That's right across from Bill Partey's, where he lives now. Granddad built that house.
Is that the corner house?
No. It was on the north side of the street going out.
And the stained glass.
1014. It was Bill Partey's. Bill Partey's is a corner house on 11th, and then right across the street was the old McVeigh property,
Yeah.
and then our house is the first house east.
I see.
And Granddad built that house.
I know them at Bay.
That's where your grandmother raised you.
Oh, some they raised them up on the hill. She raised them all over town.
Okay.
Now, did a lot of canoeing on the river, and as a boy, I used to go over in Illinois, on the old ferry boat, as the old J.T. Davis, and fish the rivers and sloughs. In the summertime, worked with my father when he was building, especially when he was building the Chautauqua area and the arches on the old street fairs. See, Dad had those contracts every year for Chautauquas and when we had our old street fairs. And Dad had that contract every year, and I helped him on that. And then I helped him on, I'm talking like I'm building the thing, but I wasn't. I just helped him.
You'd have been quite a young.
Well, I was in my teens. That was all during from 1900 about to 1912 at most of it.
Did you help on that, what they call the electric fair, where they had electric lights?
Yeah, those street fairs.
Yeah, all.
How far did those arches extend? From what corner?
Usually they extended up to 5th or 6th Street and down on Broadway, down to just past Main Street. And once in a while, they didn't build any arches, to my knowledge now, up on North Main or South Main. But there were some booths down there. But you see, those old street fairs, they were really,
Oh, yeah.
really something. And they used to bring in, of course, they'd bring in these different acts and things from all over the country. And then at the Chautauquas, we used to have a lot of, the Chautauqua was a sort of just a week stand. Like, well, they started on Sunday, and finished on the next Sunday. And they'd bring in all kind of talent. I know one year that William Jennings Bryan was here as a speaker. And then they would have these here group singers come in, or lecturers come in, or people to put on little shows that come in.
That's right down the park. You know,
Yes.
that's-
Uh-huh.
We built it.
Yeah.
It was built down on Fifth Street at the park, and they had a great big tent or canvas that stretched around there to kind of fence in.
Well, Bob, I seem to remember a tent out in the street, not in the park.
Well, that's where the Chautauqua was built, the platform, but the bleachers and seats were built out, and some of them extended into the park.
Okay.
Yeah, and of course that was before that little World War I pavilion was built there, and there was chair seats in the streets, and then the bleachers were built up in back, and they extended into the park a little ways. And well, it just depends on how large they wanted to have them. But with say there was a half a block long or something like that, you could seat a lot of people in there. And this stage was built right up where that medical building is. That's the stage was built right up in there. That was and every year they had Chautauquas. Dad always had that erecting the Chautauqua and then tearing it down after it was over. And just about as soon as that was over, then we had the street fairs. Oh, that was quite some deal. See, they kept people entertained here in Hannibal.
Now, just before we start talking about this, you mentioned canoeing across the river. Did you own a canoe?
I didn't own a canoe, but the fellow that I used to go canoeing with did.
Who?
His name was Eddie Francis, and he was a jeweler down at the old Brown's jewelry store. And we used to canoe, go out all the time on the river and canoe.
And where was the Brown's jewelry store?
Right where Pinky Smith's beneficial
Right.
financial shop.
Okay.
Right there. It was either there or that. I think it was right there where Pinky Smith is. Right, that's right next to Griffin's now.
Did you ever swim the river?
No, sir. I did not.
Did you swim in the river?
No, sir. I did not. But I used to do a lot of swimming because we had a regular swimming hole out here in Oakwood, old Fairgrounds Park. And we kids used to go out there and play baseball. And just as soon as the last out was made, we commenced stripping off our stuff and going for the old swimming pool, which was down back in Bear Creek. There's quite a hole back in there. Wham! See which one is the first one to dive in. Oh, well, listen, we just had a good time when we were kids.
Great place to live, isn't it?
Oh, listen, I've got a lineup of games down here. You want to know them now?
No. Go on through your.
Go through just
paper
like
here.
you have it.
Maybe you're doing too long.
No.
No, we brought,
And then,
we could go get more tape. We don't get too much.
then here's another thing, and I've also got a note here. Always glad when summer comes, 'cause we could go barefooted.
I always went barefooted.
Huh?
I always went barefooted.
Isabel, say that again.
I always went barefooted in the afternoons when my mother would let me.
Did you have a time, do you remember a time that you went barefooted? Did you have a given date?
Well, it wasn't exactly given, but when the sun really started to coming out, good. That was when we went.
When I was a boy, it was April Fool's Day. We
Oh,
went
yeah,
swimming on April Fool's Day, and we went barefoot.
Yeah,
Now, we
well-
might put our shoes on later, but we went swimming.
We had to put our shoes on for supper when we
Yeah.
got dressed up. But I got a picture of Mildred Walker and Virginia Spencer and myself holding our big toes out here. All three barefooted.
The one thing I remember about barefoot more than anything else is when we could get on a kind of a dusty street or road, the old dust would fly out from under our feet and fly around. I remember that real well.
How about washing your feet?
Oh, we had to do that. They needed it too.
Never ever tried to crawl into bed without washing?
No, sir. No, sir. That was taboo.
Okay.
Now, let's see. Oh, here I got a little note about met Isabel when sliding in the wintertime. Wasn't that right?
This is,
On Fifth Street Hill.
this is
We
snow.
were in home talent shows, and we used to do a lot of dancing and just plain dating. Now, here I got, I told you about my schooling already.
Where
Just
did
a
you go
minute here.
dancing?
Let's,
The Labenda Club. Labenda Club was,
That's another subject. We don't have anything on the
don't you really? Oh, that was,
Isabel, are you going to tell us about how you met him? We want a little more details. Instead of just where you met him, we want to know how you met him. Now,
That's the way.
you were-
well,
She knows more about that than I do.
I think I had my eye on him before he had his eye on me. But, because Bob is 8 years older than I am. And a bunch of us were sliding down Fifth Street. Had ice skates on. And I wasn't very good. And here came these fellows up the hill pulling their sleds. And I said, oh, help me, help me, help. And I went to Bob's arms. And that was it.
And the show's on.
Well, we didn't. Well, we didn't date, but because Bob went away to war after that. I was just in high school, but I remember we were up the Elks Club. I danced, and I had a date with Bob Courtney. I remember, and you came and take me, and
Started all over again.
and I said, well, good luck to you. And he said, just so I don't lose a leg. Then after he got back, he started dating me. And my mother didn't like it too well because he was 8 years older than I was, and I was a senior in high school. I don't think I would have liked it either if I didn't. Hello.
But anyway, it happened. Well, let's see.
Well, they say old man Starling.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
no.
right, yeah.
I think I told you a little about it. I went to grade school in Hannibal High School. I graduated from the University of Missouri in 1917. Then the war came along, and I enlisted and went to the 2nd Officers Training Camp at Fort Sheridan, Illinois. Was appointed a first lieutenant of infantry and assigned to the 8th Machine Gun Battalion, 3rd Division, Regular Army. Saw action in France and returned in April 1919. Received the Purple Heart and Silver Star. That was my. Well, after the war was over, which I was tickled to death.
Sure.
Bob saved the man.
Huh?
You saved the man. That's why.
Well, apparently that's what happened.
Well, tell us about it.
Well, you see, I was a first lieutenant, and officers, when they went out to check up on things, usually had to carry or have one of their men go with them. That was just that was standard, at least in our division. And we were out one night, and that was the Second Battle of the Marne on July 14th, 1918. And the Germans really started pouring it into, or shelling this area. And it just so happened where I had a machine gun battalion, or a machine gun platoon rather. It was 4 guns. And I was out checking those, and then I was coming back into a little dugout we had when and they were shelling this woods, and it just so happened that both of us got hit. And he had it much worse than I did because he was right in front of me. But I managed to get him into the our dugout, and later on, well, the medical end, or the what would you call them?
Well,
The medical people came and got us and took us in, and he finally lost his leg.
was it a grenade or a shell?
No, it was
or
a shell
artillery?
fragments. I still got some of them with me right now, I think. I was hit pretty bad in the right shoulder. And another thing, both of us were gassed some too. And that wasn't very
The
good.
fellow did get married, and he named his baby after Bob.
Yeah, he did get.
And his wife came in the museum not too many years ago.
No, yeah, his wife and daughter. That's
Yeah,
right.
wife and daughter.
You see, he was from Cattaraugus, New York. A very fine boy. He was a dandy, and that's why I picked him, because I knew he was a good, substantial individual, and that's why I picked him. And of course, I didn't know he was going to get wounded, or I wasn't expecting to myself, but he did. And anyway, he was just came back to the United States right away. Of course, I went up. I rejoined my outfit later on, just for the Argonne fights.
How old would you have been?
Well, let's see, 18 plus 7, about 25. And but I never got into the Argonne because I hadn't fully recuperated. And this doctor was with our battalion, sent me back for further treatments back, and that tickled me to death too.
I'll never forget the night that Bob was wounded. I had a date. Of course, we always walked. There were no cars. And we walked down the Star Theater.
They usually publish things down there. didn't they?
No. Then coming back in front of the Courier Post, there was this big headline with Lieutenant Robert Hogg wounded. And Dad, Francis was down there, and Freddie Hogg. Oh, and they were hugging each other and crying and going on. And of course, I felt bad too, but I couldn't.
We don't have in our tape about that Courier Post method of making announcements.
Oh,
Which?
How, tell us, so we'll have it on the tape, how that announcement was made at the Courier Post.
Well, the only way they had of doing it was just put up this big placard.
Did they have a wire that they hung that off of on the inside? Was that their procedure?
Of course, I don't know. I wasn't here.
I think it was just on the outside, just put up there.
Just a bulletin.
Just a bulletin, right then.
Years later, they used to have wires run on the inside. They'd hang those things up kind of like on a clothesline.
Oh, yeah.
You could read it from
Now,
the
Francis
outside.
could maybe remember that better than I could. Francis.
Yeah.
Because you see, she's a little bit older than I am.
Well, that's a little bit of information that we hadn't anticipated. Thanks, Bob. Go ahead. Let's.
Well, now I have a note. I have a note here. Games we used to play.
Oh, great.
Now this is just the games, and I'll read them off. And if you want to know anything about them, maybe I can tell you. Baseball, corkball, duck on the rock, Yankee Lilo.
Just a minute. A lot of people today don't know what corkball was.
Well, a corkball was just like a baseball, only it was about, maybe 2 inches in diameter, something like that.
Smaller.
Smaller, and it would dart up and dart down and dart around, and we used a a bat about the size of a broomstick or something like that. And we could play it out in the streets. You see, you could play in the streets in those days. You only had to stop once in a while when a horse and buggy went by. No automobiles. We hardly knew what an automobile was. But that was corkball. And then duck on the rock. Yankee Lilo.
Duck on a Rock is a game that I played, but most people don't know how to play Duck on a Rock. Give us a little account.
Well, we just had a sort of a flat rock and got another flat rock, and we had rocks, and we tried to throw and knock that duck and knock that rock off of knock the rock off of the rock.
Uh-oh.
And then we'd run around and do something. I don't know what we did. I kind of forget that end of it. But anyway, it was a game. And then Yankee.
Okay, tell us about Yankee Lilo.
Well, there's just two groups, one hunter and one hunted. And one of our group, if we were the hunted, one of our group went with the hunters. But he would place us in a certain area in this 4 square blocks. We had from 10th Street to Maple Avenue to Broadway to Bird Street. That area right in there. And he would place us in a certain place. And then he'd go back to this gang. Now, he might place us down around old Schwartz funeral now. But by the time the fella that went with the hunters, he might come in off of Maple Avenue. See? And then they'd go out and they'd start looking somewhere. And every once in a while, they'd holler, "Lost track, lost track." And then one of our gang would say, "Yankee," or no, the
Hunters?
hunted representative would say, "Yankee Lilo." Well, that means maybe they were getting close, but you just had all kind of little
It's
signals.
kind of a glorified group hide and go seek.
Amen. Of course, we played hide and low seek also. I got that down. And then run sheep run. That was a little different deal. That was just a case of just go out and hide in something like Yankee Lilo. But this gang would move around a little. And when the leader felt like that the group that was hunting was far enough away, they'd holler, "Run, sheep, run," and then they would go to a base. And if we beat them to the base, well, we'd go out and hide again. Lots of fun. Oh, and then we used to play marbles, a lot of marbles. Big ring and little ring. Now, the little ring was just maybe about a foot and a half in diameter. We'd put our little Chinese, what we call Chinese, in the ring and go back about 10 feet and lag for the ring. And if the closest to the ring would get the first shot. Of course, if we knocked those Chinese out of the ring with our shooting, then we got them. And I used to win those things like everything.
What do you keep your marbles in?
Most of them, we get some of these tobacco sacks or cigar boxes or something like that. Just to get, I had a lot of what they called the Chinese. That was the ones we shot for, and the Cornelias or agates were the ones we shot. And I used to have a dandy collection of agates.
They were generally a little bigger.
Oh yeah, and they were different sizes. And I used to have one that fit my. I was left-handed too.
What kind of tobacco sacks?
Oh, Bull Durham or something like that, Bull Durham or, oh, I forget, but I know one of them was named Bull Durham. And then we used to play hopscotch. Oh, and the big ring was where you'd just make a big ring, maybe six for 8 feet across, and put the marbles in the center, and then we shoot off the edge of the ring and try to knock them out.
Did you play roly-poly with the hole?
No, I don't know. I don't think we played. I don't think we played. Then we played hopscotch, top spinning. We used to spin tops. And I bet I had a half a dozen or dozen tops at one time. and we cut little notches in those tops to make them hum. You know, and you wrap that string around them and boom like that, and they'd just hum and like everything.
What do you make the tops out of?
Wood. We didn't make them. We usually had to go down and buy those tops.
You know it
They
now.
were made out of wood.
You know, that's something, Bob, that kids today don't know anything about, spinning
Well-
tops. Tell us how you wound the string around.
Well, we used to start by winding the string around. We hold the top up and put the string down, and then wind it around from the bottom up. And it wound up, and it was usually just a pretty good cord of some kind. And we'd wind it up to almost the top, so that when we threw it out, why, it would give the top a good spin.
Make it rotate.
Yeah, make it rotate like everything. And we used to throw it out on pretty firm surfaces. But of course, lots of these streets, when it didn't rain, was pretty fair surfaces in those days. Oh yeah, top hiking, fishing, swimming. I told you all about swimming already. Hay rides. And I told you about sliding, single sled, and bobsled, scavenger hunt. Now, and then in the wintertime, I used to play checkers and dominoes with my granddad. You see, my granddad and my grandmother raised Sis and Fred and me, and that's when we lived up on Center Street. And in the wintertime, Grandpa, right after we had supper every night, would get out the old checkerboard, and he used to beat me, and then I got to beating him.
Bob, what were the circumstances? You said that your grandfather and grandmother raised you. Your parents.
Our mother passed away in 1903. You see, I was just about 10 years old, and of course, Sis was younger, and Fred was still younger, and we lived with our grandmother Pitts down on South Fifth Street. That was in the old Stillwell house. See, Granddad owned that house at one time, and we lived there. And in the wintertime, I can remember when we lived there at grandmother. Oh, there must have been a dozen bedrooms. No, there wasn't a dozen. There were quite a few bedrooms in that house. But she had feather beds in every one of them. We kids used to just run and jump and get in those feather beds, and it was just as nice and warm as it could be.
Well, now your father lived quite a while longer.
Oh,
He lived there with
yeah, and
with his parents.
then soon after that we moved up to on Center Street to live with grandmother, and they had their house. I know it had 5 bedrooms in it, and Fred and Dad and I used to sleep in one, and Sis slept in another. Huh?
You moved to Phoenix for your mother's health.
Well, we went out to Phoenix, Arizona for my mother's health.
Now that would have been your father and you and your sister
And brother
and
mother.
And did she pass away out there?
No, here.
Here.
I can remember the first day we went out there, first night rather. Old Hannibal, St. Joe Railroad, out to Kansas City. Left Hannibal at 12:05 a.m., January the 1st, 1900. I can remember that just as well. That's when they had decided for some time.
Well, you'd have been only 7 years
I
old.
was only 7, that's right. I was, yeah. But that's,
He was just a little fellow when they lived in Phoenix. And he was a regular little clown. They wanted to adopt in the worst way.
ooh.
The couple that were so crazy
Oh,
about
no,
Freddie.
that was when we lived out in Los Angeles. We lived in
Oh,
Phoenix.
oh.
We lived in Phoenix, Arizona in the wintertime, and Los Angeles in the summertime, because Phoenix was so hot. And at that time, Phoenix was only about 7,000 people. Now, I guess it's 700,000. I don't know.
They've got at least that.
And we lived in Los Angeles when there was about 300,000. And we lived at, I can remember the old Hotel Catalina we lived at. It was on Broadway in Los Angeles, close to Angel's Flight. And the people that was running that hotel, little family hotel, wanted to adopt Fred for my brother. 'Cause he was a mimic.
This little angel's flight, now that's no longer in existence. Tell us
That's-
what that was.
Well, as I recall it, it was just a sort of a, I think it was on 3rd Street, if I'm not mistaken. But it was a little cable car sort of affair that ran up the top of a hill.
Heavy, steep hill.
A steep hill, yeah.
About less than a block.
Less than a block, that's right, yeah. Yeah.
Well, then they tore it down to build a music center, all
They
those
did.
buildings.
Now, I can't
Probably
remember, that was just a funny sort of a hill in Los Angeles, but it was there. And when we lived in Los Angeles, we used to go out to the ocean all the time. And,
How many years were you out there?
well, all together, we left, like I say, in 1900, the first day. And we came back in the spring of 1903. But Mother and we 3 children came back once on just a trip visit. Yeah.
Okay.
And but we used to go out, and when we went out there, we went out on the interurban, and we used to go out either to Santa Monica or Long Beach,
The red car.
and there was a lot of country between Los Angeles and those towns then. But I understand there's no country now.
None now. None now.
Did you go on the red cars?
I don't remember what color they
called
were.
them the red cars when we moved there. But that, we saw the end of that Angel Flight, and the cars to Long Beach and Santa Monica were all cut out when we first lived here. How long did you live in California? Oh, 58. Oh, really?
We were out there when there were some folks out there.
Very crowded.
One thing I do remember about Los Angeles, that was just the starting of moving pictures.
Hollywood.
And there was a building that we could look out of us from the hotel. Just, I think the building would have been over on, somewhere on 3rd Street, Spring Street. There was another street called Spring Street. And this building, and they used to show this picture of a fire department going down the street, and then later on of a railroad train just going across the country, something like that. And that was the start, I think, of moving pictures, more or less. It might have gotten started, but they used to show these different sketches on this building. And it was just right where we could see it from the windows.
Would they be moving things?
Oh, yeah, they were moving. The pictures were moving. They had a great big white sheet or something like that up there.
You'd see this at night.
Oh, yeah, that'd have to be at night, yeah. Now, I'm just getting started.
Good.
Oh, now you got something in there about telephones and things like. Well, I remember there was 2 telephones and companies in Hannibal at one time, and if you wanted the business, of course, most all the businessmen had to have telephones for each one. But then finally, I guess they consolidated into one. I do remember that. You got my first auto ride was with John B. Shepherd. My first auto ride was John B. Shepherd. He married my Aunt Margaret. He had an old Rambler car. Now, John B. Shepherd was Carter Shepherd Milling Company here, old flour mills. And it was down on 3rd Street where that parking lot is now.
Oh, I remember. It had a different name, but
Magnolia Mills. And then the Eagle Mills were down, that's the flour mills. They were down on Broadway there where that big parking lot is. But that old. Now, you had something about trains in Hannibal. There was about 60 passenger trains in and out of Hannibal every day, besides the freight trains. They were coming in from all directions, from St. Louis, from the north, from the west, and from the east. Well, there was the Burlington Railroad, There was a Wabash Railroad, and then there was a Short Line Railroad. And the MK&T, of course, that ran over on a Wabash track. Because the MK&T ran from Hannibal to Moberly and then down into the southwest. And the Wabash ran from Hannibal to Moberly and Kansas City. And the Wabash went east to Detroit. Go through Springfield, Decatur, all in that way. Of course, the Burlington was north and south, and then one west to Kansas City. Oh, the river. This is good. Of course, there was passenger and freight boats all the time running up and down the river. And excursion boats. These excursions were quite the fun. Usually, there was a Strictness line that had one of the boats. I think theirs was the JS. And they'd start up the river, and they'd have an excursion maybe out of Clarksville. A day excursion. Then they'd run a night excursion out. The day excursion was usually some church organization or some kind of an organization. And they'd get back here in time to get all shaped up again, and we had our moonlight excursions, and that's where we had the fun. Go on those moonlight excursions, dancing.
You pay 25 cents.
Huh?
You pay 25 cents for
25
that
cents,
day.
yes.
That day.
Yeah.
At night, I think probably it's about
I
50
think
or
50 cents, something like that.
At night.
Maybe $1 a couple. Or
we gone all day on, but then come back and dance.
See, the church.
That's you.
Usually, I think the Episcopal and the Presbyterian Church got together, and they give a big
Take your lunch. It was a
On
big
these
day.
day excursions, now would they go to a place like Quincy where you'd get off of the boat, or were you on the boat
Yeah,
all the
they
time?
could make
Walk up and give you a certain length of
They
time.
could make Quincy in time. They get up there and they can give you a couple of hours of Quincy.
Well, sometimes they go to Keokuk,
Well, I guess they would, but they could.
but not too often.
And that's too far away. But Quincy was, then they'd give you some time to get off.
Walk
But they
up
always,
that big hill.
huh?
Walk
from
up that big hill. Huh?
Yeah. Well, they didn't have any much of a little hill there sometime to get up. Well, of course, ours was, well, you know our river. But, and that, we used to have a regular run, daytime, usually church.
Was it true that they got up on the top deck to spoon?
Oh, sure.
That was right. Maybe you wouldn't up there to spoon, but you go up there to watch.
Was that what?
To look at the moon. You go up there and look at the moon. That's why they called it moonlight. Yes, it was true, very true.
That was true.
Let's see. Flying Eagle, of course, the Flying Eagle, sunk here.
Do you remember the Flying Eagle?
Barely. We were home, we'd come home. That was in 1903, and I do remember it. And
know the people that were drowned, too.
Roberta Kurtz was one.
And Eichenberger.
Alan Eichenberger. Was it Alan Eichenberger?
Harry.
Harry
Harry
Eichenberger.
Eichenberger.
And there was someone else, too. Of course, there was one.
Laura.
Yeah.
One of the cooks.
One of the cooks.
That's the cook.
Oh, and that third party, I forget.
girl.
Yeah, it was Lonnie B. Kurtz. Lonnie B. Kurtz is the one.
Yeah.
I don't remember the other
We
one.
haven't done
Oh, you got something about my athletics years ago. I played baseball and basketball and track in high school. Done baseball at Missouri University 3 years. 1 year professional baseball, 3I league. And when I came out of the university, see, my amateur period was up. I played the 3 full years at the Missouri U. And one of the Hannibal was in the 3I league at the time, and one of their men was hurt, and my Uncle Harry called down there or something, wanted to know if I could get up and kind of substitute with the Hannibal team. And I played with the Hannibal team for, a month or more. And then this player he broke his leg, that's all. And then when he got well, Mr. Riedel, Henry Riedel, who was president of the Hannibal team at that time, got me a place with Fort Smith in the Western Association, and I finished the season there.
What position did you play?
I played outfield, but when I was at the Missouri University, you'd be surprised. I played first base. But you know what I told those boys on the infield? Throw them low and I'll get them. Throw them high and I'll chase them.
Well, now, when the 3I League was here, where did they play?
Out at Roble Park.
Roble Park.
That's across from the Hannibal Quincy truck offices now. And that used to be the old streetcar barns.
Yeah.
At Roble Park, there was a bridge right across there, and then there was an area right over there. It was made a funny-shaped ballpark. But let me tell you something, the folks used to come out there.
I was out there. I saw
And you know, later on, when I came back, that was during the 17, just prior to my going up to Fort Sheridan. When I came back, then we at Hannibal organized the Ilmo League, and I played a few years ago, and we played out to Roble Park with the old Hannibal team in the Ilmo League.
Yes, isn't that a strange way of getting a name?
Oh, here's something that's... Oh, yeah, we used to go... Wait a minute. Oh, you asked something about business. Practically all the businesses in Hannibal at that time were locally owned. There were no chain stores around here. And some of which was the Park Theater, John Price, and the movies. Also the Nickelodeon. We had a Nickelodeon. And they always had a piano player in there that used to play for the pictures. Of course, there were silent pictures. And this piano player, when there was a sad part, she'd play sad music. And when there was a lively part, they'd whoop it up. She would just keep the thing going.
Where was the Nickelodeon?
Well, there was one Nickelodeon up on North Main Street. And as it so happened, my dad had it. He got it some way for a little while, but he got rid of it as soon as he could. And I think he had to take it over because he worked. He was a builder, and he'd fix the interior to do it, and they couldn't pay him, so Dad had to take it over, and he ran that Nickelodeon for a little while. And then there was another Nickelodeon right down where Martinizers are now. There was one there.
On the alley.
On the alley, yeah. Yeah.
Well, that turned into a regular, they called it Nickelodeon when I was a kid. Where was this other one up on North Main? Was it near your...
Yeah, it was right up there. It was right up in there, but there wasn't any harness shop then. Granddad got out of the harness business a long time ago.
Any vaudeville with the movie?
No, just playing movies. And they'd show some shorts and then a sad reel or something like that, or a sad show.
Do you remember any of the shows?
No.
The name of
No, I don't.
Do you remember any of the cereals?
I don't remember, no. All I remember...
Harold and Pauline.
Well, yeah,
Pearl White.
Pearl White.
Harold and White.
She was one of the Pearl.
And Mildred-
She was Pearl Pauline.
Mildred Walker Stillwell and I, we'd go see Theta Vera. My mothers didn't know we went, but we got a dime to go see her down there at the Star Theater after school.
That was the Star Theater, though. That was
Do you remember what they called her? The Vamp.
Vamp?
Vamp,
Right.
yeah. Gee, that was a...
Vamp.
They just said that quietly, though. One thing I can remember, now this is interesting, I think. one thing I can remember about the river. I can remember my father taking me down to the river to watch the lumber rafts come in. He seemed to know when they were due. Tie up along the shore, and the lumber was usually cut. Oh yeah, tie up along the shore. You know, they used to raft lumber down here, and that was one of the big businesses of Hannibal at one time. You know the reason? On account of the Hannibal to St. Joe Railroad being the first railroad west out of here in the state of Missouri. And the North Missouri Lumber Company had lumber yards scattered all along that route.
What do you remember about those rafts?
Well, they'd bring that lumber down from the Wisconsin or Minnesota. I think most of it came from Wisconsin. And they'd bring it down in rafts. It was usually cut to length, but unfinished. So when they got it down here, they'd take this lumber, haul this lumber from the rafts up, and the area from 3rd Street to 7th Street, from Collier Street to the Wabash Railroad was just filled with lumber piles, curing. Now, when those lumber piles were cured, these lumbermen here in town, which there were several, get orders out along the Hannibal and St. Joe Railroad and other places that send them to these planing mills to smooth them out, finish it out, and then ship it west. And my dad and granddad had a planing mill here at one time. And unfortunately, days before there was too much insurance, fire.
Where was this?
That was down in Hogg's Row, down there where that was why how it got the name, Hogg's Row. See, and then later on, well, they built a couple of little houses down there too, and rented them out to colored folks. But they had and this planing mill, they had a nice one, but when they lost it by fire, why, it just didn't help them out any. It didn't help them at all. And that's when they went more or less into the, Dad went into the lumber business, or building business rather.
Do you think it started from sparks from the train?
We always thought that there was another planing mill in town whose owner had an enemy, and it burned. And he contracted with grandfather and father to take over his work. And we think that fella, just whoever set that on fire, set this on fire. We just had, now that's just theory.
Proved, but that's
Just,
what
that's
your son.
supposition, yes.
Do you remember that planing mill pretty vividly?
No, I remember the building though, but of course when after it burned down, they rebuilt that building into just a home and rented it out. Because Granddad was about ready to retire anyway. And you see, he was 92 when he passed away. And he was way around in his 70s then. And I can remember Granddad when he was about 90, something like that. We were living up there on Center Street. Grandma went out there in the backyard one time. John Oliver, you come down over that roof or you fall off on that big high house. He was up on top of the roof watching. They were shingling. You come down over that house. Now, that's the end of the story.
There's a brass plate up in the courthouse that has J.O. Hogg.
That's James Oliver Hogg. That was my uncle, grandfather's son.
I didn't hear that.
You see, he was an architect, and as near as I can figure out, he was an architect with the University of Illinois, or graduated there in architecture. He drew the plans for the policeman station. Granddad built the police station.
I had this name called several
Granddad built the police station. I know he was very instrumental. He also built this house where Helen Knighton lives now. That was the old crochet house. It was on the spot where the Rockcliffe Mansion is. They moved it over there. But Granddad built that. It was Hogg and Shed then. And
Were there some other dwellings, houses that you know of that he built?
well, of course, he built the one we lived in, and then Dad built 2 houses up on Bird Street. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th house from 10th Street on the left-hand side going out. He built that house and the one next to it. And I was born in that one he built on Bird Street.
You know, there's a house, Bob, on the corner, corner across the street from the Green Lawn Rest Home, whatever that is.
You mean the Settles
Old
home?
Old Pettibone house.
Well, that was a Pettibone.
That where this rest home is. But corner across the street from him, there's a house on the corner there.
Brick house?
Brick house.
That's Settles. Oh, Settles lived there for years. D-Lo Settles. And
Now, that house runs back to an alley.
that's right.
And then there is now a yellow building in there. Let's see, is that right? Yeah, a yellow building that's been made into an apartment house. Would you have any idea who built that house?
I wouldn't have any idea who built it, but I think I knew who owned it at one time. It was Louis Arnson. He was a high...
Bob, you want to tell us about President Carter's visit here? This is something maybe...
Well, as much as I know about it, I may, of course, Henry could tell you a lot more about it than I can. But when he was here, of course, I was behind the desk down at the museum. And I just sat there just like this until they finally got around to coming into the museum. Of course, you know, we closed the museum at that time to the public. And I was behind the desk, and of course, Henry, in his usual talented way, was giving him the red carpet treatment, the family, and he did a good job too. And when he came around to the desk, why, he says, I want you to meet this man behind the desk here, to Carter. Okay. Carter, he introduced me, Bob, President Carter. I said to President Carter, you're doing a pretty good job in this country. You've got a lot to do. I got a pretty good job right here, and I've got a lot to do. He says to me, you want to trade? I says to him, no, sir. Then he says, Rosalind, come on over here and meet this man. So she was looking at the Walter Russell's characters up there. And she says, come on over here and meet this. So she introduced me, and that's when that picture was taken. I was shaking hands with Rosalind.
Isn't that wonderful? Oh, that's marvelous.
We were in the museum watching you. We were at the front door.
Were you?
We were right inside the front door. We gave him a copy of our book.
Oh, really?
Last thing.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I wish I had a copy of that book. I wish I had 2 copies of it.
Bob, tell
I'm so
me,
mad that I didn't.
did you have a dream that he was coming? Or were you
Dream?
kidding? One night at Danforth, turn that off. One night at Danforth, you said you dreamed. You had a dream that the Carters came in the museum. Do you remember?
Well, I don't remember.
Yeah, that night.
I think he was just pulling our
I
leg.
think he was kidding.
I could have been.
I think he was kidding us.
I,
No, he hadn't come yet.
I don't really remember that.
Bob, there's
I
one
think you
thing.
were teasing us.
For the purpose of this tape, what year was this that Carter came to Hannibal?
He was a strong.
It was 3 years.
Would it have been
3 years ago.
1979?
I think it was 79. It was the year he came down the river.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the year he came down the river.
To leave, she went out the door with the little girl and their secretary, Nancy Green. And all of a sudden, he turned around and came back and shook hands with you again and said, "Keep up the good work,
Yeah.
Bob."
Yeah.
Now, so tell that on tape.
Yeah. Well, all I just remembered when he started out the door and he came back and said, "Keep up the good work, Bob."
He sure did.
Yeah. I asked him, I said, "You want to trade?" And he said, "No, sir." I said, "No, sir."
He was very tough, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Well, I just remember her coming in. I guess Isabel remembers that.
Well, Miss
That
Anderson,
she gave you
she
a,
gave us a good story
Oh,
of Miss Anderson and Miss
Oh, yeah.
Johnson.
Johnson
Lady.
and Mrs. Humphrey
Uh-huh.
coming. She
Yeah.
told us that.
Well, they were, well, it's Mrs.
I'm
Humphrey.
afraid that's not going to fit very, very good. I'm going to change it. You've had it. Turned
I
over.
want to change mine too.
Too long.
Of the Hannibal residents.
All right.
Quite,
Any,
of course,
any more visitors though?
Isabel got Eddie Hodges, but
Who's, tell us.
I don't remember much about him except he was just Eddie Hodges. You know, he was in that. You remember he was with the first fella that went up into space. He's a senator.
Astronaut.
Yeah, he's a senator now from Ohio. Or,
Glenn, John
John
Glenn.
Glenn.
yeah, he was on that. I think that. That musical program they had, the musical program they had,
The centennial year.
where he made this picture of,
Well,
there was a picture that he made, a Mark Twain picture of, was it Huckleberry Finn or Tom Sawyer?
Yeah.
Huckleberry Finn,
I
right.
think it was,
Bob, for the sake of our recording here, how did you get started down the Mark Twain Museum and all?
well, we lived in Beloit, Wisconsin. And when Mr. Storrs passed away, why, I had been on a coal salesman on the road, and I knew pretty much about coal wholesale, and incidentally, I learned on my travels about retailing coal, and that's when the Storrs Coal and Stoker Company was still in operation down on the riverfront. Well, Walter, Isabel's brother, was running it, and he had an opportunity to go with Wentz on us. So we came back to Hannibal to run the coal yard. That's how we came back to Hannibal. And I always said that when we were up there in Wisconsin, that if any time everything happened to Mr. Storrs, and they wanted me to come back, I had a pretty good place up there working. They wanted me to come back, well, I would, because I had always had a hunch I'd like to get back to Hannibal. I just kind of liked the place. In fact, when I was traveling on the road up in there, you know what they used to call me? Hannibal Hogg. Why? Because I talked about Hannibal and I talked about Missouri. Now you shut this off, will you? I want to tell you a little something. Well, okay, and that's how. That's when we came back, and then I ran the coal business until we had to shut the yard down on a lack of business. Well, Sis was the curator, or I guess manager, whatever, down there at the museum, and I told her, well, first I worked for Charlie Strode for a while until finally the coal business just went out of Hannibal. And then that's when I went to work with Sis down there.
Now, Sis sis
It's
is
Francis Anderson.
Frances Anderson, who at that time stayed at the museum. and
That's
took
right.
care
She
of the
lived
museum.
upstairs, yeah.
All right.
We'll call her the manager.
All right.
They didn't have a curator at that time. The manager. Well, I said to her, and she needed some help there in the summertime. And I said to her, I said, sis, if you just give me a few hours a week down here, I think I'd like it. And it would be just enough to keep me out of business, out of mischief, not business, keep me out of mischief. So that's how I got started down there.
I started working for DJ.
Did you?
Oh,
Uh,
my.
When did you
Several-
start, Isabel?
Several years.
Do you remember approximately what year?
She must have started about
I
in
worked
the
at,
50s. Just after your mother passed away?
oh, yeah.
It was after she...
It was after she died
That
in
was
58.
1958,
I'd say about 1960. I worked down in there
yeah.
And
Full
then-
time.
Then, well, you were still working down there when I came
Sure.
here.
Yeah, I still work.
Yeah,
sure.
It's just been 2 years since
Yeah.
I haven't.
But,
But in the winter, I didn't work full time.
well now, if Isabel started in the 50s, you would have started approximately what? When?
About
Late-
65 or 66.
around that period
Yeah,
of time.
yeah.
Okay, all right.
Well, after I went down there, I just started feeling all the time like, well, I own this place.
Well,
I just felt that way. I've felt that way ever since.
It's been a good thing for the museum.
And he's enjoyed it.
And your services have been appreciated.
And
Well,
Henry
I
enjoyed
feel
it.
like they have because Bill wrote us a nice letter a few years back. Do you remember that letter he wrote? Just thanking us for the help and assistance.
The first I heard about you was from Ralph Gregory.
Oh, really?
He was at our house and he told us about how well you had helped. And he also told us that something about your boyhood, just a little bit, kind of a little sketch. That
I
he
like
just
Ralph
gathered up.
Gregory.
Yes,
I like
fine man.
him.
Now let's go to these famous Hannibal people. Morris Anderson.
Morris Anderson, I think, was the instigator of the museum. I really think he was. And he did a lot of work, and a lot of that work down there is Morris Anderson's work. You know, they had a museum down in the trust company before, and when they decided in the what I call the lean years, the 1930s, and got that WPA work to build that, or rebuild that present museum and the wall back of it, I think Morris Anderson engineered practically that whole thing. I really do. Now that's Morris Anderson.
Tell us all you can. Did you know him very well?
Well, I felt like I knew him fairly well. Yeah, in his early days, Morris Anderson was a lawyer, you know,
Yes.
primarily. But I think that he tried to do everything he could. Besides law, he coached the Hannibal High School football team for years and years and years. He coached them. And he lectured on that's how I think he got interested in Mark Twain. He lectured on Mark Twain around the country. I do know that. And between times, I guess he practiced law. But that's how I know him. But he was, to me, a pretty aggressive man. He just reminded me all the time. And like he was ready to get in there and play football with the high school boys. He just reminded me of
But Barry Schechter is the only one left that's on the original board. Is that right?
Yeah.
We're going to take him.
Yeah.
We're going to
Oh, good. He's wonderful.
Better get a loudspeaker on when you do.
I talked with him this morning.
Did you?
about
But now that's all I remember really, and about Morris Anderson. Of course, a lot of the time when he was so active around Hannibal, we were away from here. You see, we left Hannibal around 1930 and didn't come back until 1955. And
You were about 25 years up north.
that's right, in Rockford, Illinois, and Beloit, Wisconsin.
I came back from my dad.
Becky Thatcher Frazier, all I just knew her. Knew who she was, that's all. Laura, Mr. Pettibone, of course, I didn't know him. When I say I didn't know him, it's just like a lot of these prominent Hannibal people. I knew them and knew about them, but I just weren't in contact with them very much. Who?
Bill Pettibone.
This is Mr. W.B. Pettibone
That gave the park.
that gave the park and built the home. That's W.B. Pettibone.
Central level,
That-
he was so modest about it.
That's one thing. That's one thing that he was. When he did something, he did it for Hannibal, but he did it
Not for sure.
like somebody. He didn't want anybody to know about it. But he used to do an awful lot of things for Hannibal. And I know of two places that he bought the property and tore down the buildings. One of them was at northeast corner of Maple Avenue and Broadway. There used to be an old brick house there. It sat right out there that you couldn't see anything coming from Broadway when you came down Maple Avenue. He tore that out, bought that and tore that down. Property across from the Hannibal or Levering Hospital. There was a lot of old buildings there. And he tore all those buildings down so that you should see the Levering Hospital from the school, and just tore that, cleaned out that whole area. And it needed cleaning out too. That's what I know about Mr. Pettibone. And of course he gave the park. I do know that. And he left, I would say, at that time, what was a sizable amount of money for maintenance. And it's been turned over now to the city, I understand. And that's just part of the maintenance money that the city has now, because, well, you know, nowadays the financial setup is so much greater than in those days. I wish we had those days back. Well, now you've got Lester Gaba down here. You knew Lester better than I did. You didn't know him, did you?
Well, I knew him very well because Mary Storrs.
Yeah.
He's a friend of
I
Mary.
thought that was for you.
Mary Garner Storrs, yeah. You know, he Lester Gaba.
Now I've got the name of George Stevens Moore. Who was George Stevens Moore, you say? Well, he was a Hannibal, born in Hannibal. He moved away from here when he was 7 or 8 or 9 years old. His father was a railroad man. He went, I don't know, I think he went to Harvard. Graduated from Harvard, became connected with one of the big banks of New York.
Citibank, didn't it?
Citibank of New York.
Cut it out of paper.
He finally went up through the ranks to president and chairman of the board of the Citibank of New York. And he's now you can shut this off if you want to right now. But he's the fella that I wanted to contact quite a long time ago when they talked about building that extra building on the lot down there. I guess they've given that up. You know what I
know.
but that's where it ought to be rather than self-building.
Well, I have
You have to
agree
disagree.
with you. No, I agree with you, but under the circumstances currently, rather than nothing, I think it's going to go down the other place.
Well, I have an idea about that, but to me, it's doing just the thing that Morris Anderson wanted to do. Have the museum and the home together. He wanted it that way. And I think everybody at that time wanted it that way. But I know that this other thing is so, but George Stephen Moore was the individual that I told Bill Garnett I wanted to contact to see if he couldn't get us lined up with some of these big endowment company or people, and to build that building on there and have our museum all together. That is the one big disappointment.
I died real hard on that one, Bob, myself.
I haven't died yet, but I might as well. I just, that's the one thing that's made me lose a lot of interest down there. I hate to say that, but it has.
Well, it's a real problem. And
Her mother
They-
and his mother,
we have some fellows that don't like to lose face,
that's how
Bob.
close it is. And he came
And
I know
rather
it.
than admit that they were wrong
3 weeks ago
4 or 5 years
in a
ago,
big,
they go with the other building. Well, that's the way it's going to go. And if I'm going to be able to do anything,
But there was Walter Weisenberger. Well, Walter Weisenberger in World War II was the vice president of manufacturing, I think, of arms and everything like that under Roosevelt. He was picked by Roosevelt, Walter Weisenberger. Now that's,
well, was he a Hannibal man?
yeah, he was born and raised here in Hannibal.
You knew him as a kid?
I didn't know. I knew who he was. No, he was older than I was. And you see, most of his time here was, well, he left Hannibal. I'll tell you who can tell you about him. Harry Scheidecker. Harry was telling me a few things about him. So when you talk to Harry, you talk to Harry about Walter White. He'll tell you about him. Jake Beckley, baseball player, and he was quite well known in the sports world. Old eagle-eyed Jake Beckley. And I remember he came, he was playing with Pittsburgh, I think, and he came back to Hannibal. They played the old Hannibal ball team here, beat the stuffing out of them. Well, it was a big league team. They ought to beat them. they ought to, but he came back with them anyway and showed off. There's Robert Kuntz, Admiral of the Navy. Of course, I didn't know him. A man I don't have down here was Senator Hatch, founder of the Department of Agriculture of the United States. Here's another man I've got down here that very few people, Park Stillwell. He's a judge. He was a judge of what kind of a judge is it? Albert Redland is.
He's in the state. What is it? It's not the Supreme Court, but it's.
It's really, yeah. Well, Park Stillwell he's born here in Hannibal. He belongs. He's a nephew of Walter Stillwell.
That's a federal district court.
That's right. Out in Los Angeles, and who was it? Park Stillwell. I think at one time was quite involved in law with Johnny Carson as his lawyer. Now that's Park Stillwell. Now here's a Lear. I don't remember his first name, but you know he got into the Lear jets, you know. And well, of course Admiral Coach, he's from Hannibal.
What did Donald Nelson do? Was it something war?
Donald Nelson was in charge.
Who? Donald Nelson. Yeah, that's another.
He was in charge of defense production.
That's right.
That's it. And they came out in the papers, unfortunately, that we lived on the wrong side of the track. What difference?
Well, if you're on the wrong side of the tracks and you got over there, they run you back on the right side of the track.
I want to come back. Now, are you about through with that?
Well, what do you want to come?
I want to be sure we cover this.
I'm going to give you this.
Okay. I want to be sure we cover all of these, and then I want to get Isabel, and then I want to come back with the two of you on this tape. So if you're through in
I'm
that...
not gonna be as long as Bob.
Well,
We like it long. You're gonna be
Oh,
so.
the important thing in
Oh.
this is the little things is what you really get information out of this.
okay, I got one more thing here that's interesting. The old Park Theater. When we were kids, youngsters, we used to go up to the Roost. Do you know what the Roost was?
Yeah.
Shut
don't.
this off. It was liquor everything.
I didn't get it cut off.
Didn't you? But anyway, you know, there's some awfully good shows that used to come here.
Yeah.
John Price owned that theater, and he used to have some good shows come here.
Yeah.
And there was really fine shows. And we'd had to go up to get up to the Roost. That was just a free-for-all, first come, first served. So we used to go down there and stand in line like they do at the baseball games right now, hurry to get the tickets so we could get the front row or the second row in the Roost. And because there were 3 or 4 more rows up, but if we could get the first and second row, why, sound came up so we could hear the whole show up there. But you get back too far,
They colored people have to sit up there then?
uh,
If they came.
if they got there before the white folks. But I'll tell you
Oh,
what,
They wouldn't let us sit down.
No.
well, they had a place, I think, back in the corner,
You know,
the
not-
Park
They
Theater.
could sit any place they wanted to.
Oh, no, they had a section. But, of course, there was more white fellas up there than colored fellas, so we got the front seats.
Do you remember the Park Hotel?
Faintly, just faintly. It was on where the
You're the one that
Rob-
got
Roby-
6 or
Rob-
7 when that
apartments
burned
are.
down. It'd only been about 5 when that burned down. Roberta.
Burnt down in '99.
Yeah, that's-
5 or 6.
I remember. I do faintly remember the building. It's on the northwest corner
I
of
read it in
the Center
Ricky
and
Rich's
4th
diary.
Street.
Oh, the fire.
Where the apartments are now.
I could have forgotten the date, but he tells it
Now,
down
What's that located?
here's something else that somebody might not bring up.
on the corner.
On the old New London gravel road, just before you got into Oakwood, there was a toll gate. And you had to pay a toll fee to drive on past that road to get on out to New London. Now, who got the money from that, I don't know. But anyway, I think it cost a dime to go through that toll gate. But it was right there. You know where there's a nursing home is up on the hill on the right-hand side going up? Well, it was that road that goes down to the left, across the railroad, just before you get into Oakwood.
That's 29th Street, and that old building is still there.
That old building is still there because I saw it the other day.
You said something, though, just now. You said the old nursing home up on the right, up
Yeah.
on the hill, just kind of
Yeah.
across the street from it. Was that what that was, a nursing?
Not then, but I don't know, that was just a home then.
Whose home was that?
I don't know who lived there. I don't know, but it was
A man just bought it. He called it in Oakwood.
just before you get there. I tell you who stayed out there was a woman that wrote all the music, you know, who was the woman that wrote the music? Didn't she belong to your church? You know who I mean.
Yeah,
Who?
Davis.
Davis, yeah.
Davis.
Didn't she stay up there at that place? Wasn't she up there for a while? Or didn't you take something?
Yeah.
Didn't you take something? You took something up to her
A
for
great
a
big
while.
brick
I took her to the
house.
hospital once.
Yeah,
Brother,
yeah.
Valray.
Well, was it a nursing home for quite a while?
Well, I don't know how long it was a nursing home.
You know, that old house, we've not been able to...
Is that all?
No, it's on. We've not been able to get any information about that old house, and we've had at least a half dozen people very much interested in that old house.
There's somebody out there in Oakwood that might be able to tell you about that old house. That's Edwin Wilson. Used to be the State Farm agent, you know, and he knows that area out there. And he might be able to tell you something about it. Now, dude, you can start with the young lady across the way.
Well, we're ready now
I've
to...
never done this.
Oh, you'll love this. You're on the air now. We're going to start now with Isabel, and so let's start, Isabel, and I see you have some notes there answering questions that we asked you too. So if you just start with what you have.
All right. Well, I was born October 11th, 1901, in Hannibal. And my parents were, my mother was Florence Esselman Smith. Really was Schmidt. Her father came from Germany, but they changed it to Smith. And my father's name was Walter Armstrong Stores. And my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, was Isabel Deborah Stores. That's right. Only she spelled her name Isabel. So she said I was not named after her.
Isabel, did they all live in Hannibal? Your grandparents?
Not at first. No, not at first.
Where did they come from? To Hannibal?
They came from my grandfather, George Walter Stores, lived in Joliet, Illinois. And he was in the lumber business. And let me see. Now, you know my brothers before this?
Yes.
My brothers, I had three brothers, George Walter Stores, who married Mary Garner, and the Stuart Esselman Stores, and he never married. He died when he was 24. And Walter A. Stores, the second, married Minnie Herman, and they had three children. Well, I don't tell about their children.
Isabel, you didn't tell us where you were born here in Hannibal. Where were you born at home? Now, Isabel, let's go back and pick up this part about the Planters Hotel and your grandfathers running that hotel and your uncles and the children that were born there.
Well, my grandfather came from Joliet and married my grandmother. And he became proprietor of the Planters Hotel for, I think, about 12 years. And they had 5 children born there. And 4 of them died of diseases or something. Then my father, Walter, was born, and a dear friend of theirs asked if she could try to see if she could raise the baby for a little while, and she did. And it was in good health, and so my grandmother took Walter back. Then, in the meantime, my grandfather built the house up on 501 North Fifth Street. And so my folks moved there. The 3 of them moved there. And that's when my brother, George and Stuart, and I think I was born there. Because I have a book, 1901, that of a photograph album that says to his wife. And so we lived over there until I was about 5 years old. I remember
Your dad built this house on that.
coming over and seeing this house, and incidentally, Bob's father was the contractor.
That built
this house.
This house.
Not
yeah.
knowing he was going to be my father-in-law someday.
Yeah.
But I can remember going up the steps, and I must have been about 5 skeleton steps, and I remember being kind of afraid going up steps. That's what I remember. And we moved over here and possibly lived here till I was about 12, and then we moved back over there and lived there until I graduated from high school. Then we moved back here. It was too much. It was 3 stories for my mother to take care of.
So your life really has been spent, except for the time you were away from Hannibal.
Yes,
In these 2 houses.
2 houses all the time.
You know, Isabel, somebody told us a story. I guess it was Elizabeth Eichenberger who told us a story about your father had some stables in here someplace.
I think this used to be a stable.
This, you mean this building?
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, this area.
No, I think.
Oh, no, she was thinking of the stable down on the river.
No.
No, I
it was
think-
here at this place.
Oh, here.
I
here.
think it was. I think.
Well, I don't know that it was
Mhm.
here, but it was here and back
Mhm.
someplace.
Well, it was,
Well, instead of having a garage, he had stable
oh, no, it had to be here on this end of the
because
lot.
he had horses. He had
It
horses,
had to be on this end of the lot.
and then he made this into this home. This
Well, I
home.
guess he
Uh-huh.
tore down the stables and built this home. Of course, you know, he had
Uh-huh.
the stables down on the riverfront also.
But I went to Old North School, which is the Pettibone School now, and we never had bells ring to say it's time to come to school. There was this big, large, old sweet darky out in front, ringing a great big bell, saying it's time to come, and we'd go, and a lot of us would kiss her. We just loved her. Just loved her.
Is a woman.
Yeah, big woman, big. I just see her now, ringing
Call her
the bell.
Mammy.
Mammy,
Who's
uh-huh.
she? I wonder how she got there.
I guess they must have just appointed her for that job. So then
She
I
wouldn't
went.
have cooked meals or
Oh no,
anything.
no, she just was the bell ringer. She was the bell
That's
ringer.
interesting.
And so then I went to Central School for a couple of years. And Mildred Walker Stillwell lived right down here on Rock Street. And we were buddies. We walked to school every single day of our life together. And we'd walk out to the high school. And at noon we had 1 hour. We walked home. We even combed our hair and ate lunch and got back in an hour. Now, wouldn't children have a fit over that? And then we both played basketball on the team for 3 years. And we played this awful gym out in the high school that had posts all over it. We had to dodge all these posts while we practiced. And then we'd play our games down to Y. The girls would have their game first, and Mildred and I both played on the team for 3 years. Then, after our game was over, we'd run up the hill with our basketball. She'd go down there, I'd go home, change her clothes, she'd come back with me, we'd go back, see the boys' game, then we'd go to a dance. No cars, nothing. Now, can you imagine that?
Where would the dance be?
Up at Lavina Club.
At the Lavina Club.
And sometimes it might be formal. And we'd wear long skirts and walk down to the game and walk to the dance and back. And
When, do you know, when the Lavina Club closed?
oh, that's not too, that burned. That
Oh,
burned.
that was way back.
Well, the Lavina
It had to
Club.
be in the 20s. Well, I don't know. You know what Lavina is? Hannibal spelled backwards.
Everything's spelled back.
Well, now, the Lavina Club,
I thought, was the current lodge place up there, the Eagles or...
It was the Eagles Lodge,
Lodge.
but they rented it out to we kids for dances.
Wow.
But didn't the Paladins have their dances up there? The Paladins, which was quite a...
Tell us a little bit about the Lavina Club, the building, the operation of that club itself. Do you know about that?
Well, I just know we went up 3 flights to
It was
dance.
on the 3rd floor.
Yeah.
The dance hall.
Dance.
Second floor was a lodge.
Uh-huh. Wasn't anything elegant.
Lodge building, and the dance floor was just up on the 3rd floor.
We have a piano player and a couple other, a big time.
Drum and a
Yeah,
Horn.
big time, big time.
Where was the Rose Garden?
The Rose Garden was down the next block on Broadway,
Right across from the Federal
upstairs.
Building.
We go there
On
sometimes
the
to
corner
dance.
building?
That was a public building. No,
There's above, like Goodman's or,
the one building at where the
Bus station?
bus station is, then it was the next building, and there was a pretty big dance floor up there. That was a public dance. Everybody went to the Rose Garden. Well,
but there'd be a different type of people there, sort of too.
Yeah.
But it was kind of fun to go to the Rose Garden. That was your kind of big stuff. Then I guess you want to know something about my mother's folks. Nicholas Schmidt was his name, and he he married Fanny Esselman, my mother's mother, and Nick had 8 children, and Nick was a cigar maker at Eichenberger's smoke shop. He played a cornet in the Hannibal band in the Central Park, and I still have the cornet. Played at concerts. That was a big deal. And then my grandfather started the coal business. Ice stores.
It was wood then.
Wood started the wood business in early 1870s, I guess.
That was your father's father.
Yeah. Then my father took over the business and had coal then.
Well, he started to get,
Coal.
that's when coal, they started to use coal. He was a progressive individual, Mr. Stowers.
And then he, as his partner, he took in Mr. Hinton, Stores and Hinton. Stores and Hinton. And then the ice business,
Then he bought out.
yeah.
Go ahead.
And then the ice business came after putting up natural ice out of the river, and with a conveyor and all, and that was quite a deal in town when they were going to put up ice. Everybody went down the river to watch it, and of course they had to even do it on Sundays because of the thickness of the ice. The ice had to be from 14 inches to 16 inches. And you had to have about 3 weeks of zero weather for that. Of course,
We
you
had
don't
it in
do,
those days.
and we don't do that anymore.
Let's not get away from this ice business.
All right.
Because this is pretty important in Hannibal's history. Now, when the river had a coating of ice thick enough, then they would work. Did they work at nights?
No, I don't think so, because they didn't have lights. But they worked from dusk, or from dawn to dusk.
Now, in the cutting of the ice, did they do that by machinery?
Yeah.
Or was it
Stores,
by hand?
well, he had a motor saw. He had to have a motor saw.
Motorized saw.
Yeah.
Okay, and they would cut it in blocks approximately 300 pounds?
That's right.
And they would float it from where it was cut over into some sort of a
Conveyor.
conveyor that would take it out of the water.
I got pictures of it.
Have you?
Mm-hmm.
And then this conveyor would take it up
Up,
to the
Ice.
into the area where they were going to store it.
and that's still there. That old ice house is
One
still
of them.
there.
There was another one, you know,
Yeah.
down on the river.
Uh-huh.
But then after it got in this place, did they pack it in sawdust?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that
Uh,
kept it.
Was sawdust between each block, or did they
Each.
block upon block upon block and then sawdust?
That's right. A block, sawdust. A block, sawdust. That's the way they could break it loose from the first cutting, you see, and it broke pretty straight. But here's one thing. Now you can turn that off. You want to leave it on?
I want to leave it on.
Because Mr. Storrs was a very progressive individual. And he built an ice house lay on the river, and he had my dad build it, incidentally. And he had a moving platform that moved right up the side. And the reason he had the dad do that is because he knew that Dad could do it. And when this conveyor, they'd get this layers of ice. You see, there was openings along this building in 3 or 4 different places. And when this platform would get up and they'd get built to this opening, then the platform would move right up to the next platform. And that's the way they filled that ice house. That was really a modern way of doing things.
How many men would be involved in harvesting the ice?
Oh, I imagine sometimes he'd have as many as 45 or 50 men. There's an interesting part of that. Mr. Storrs always had help. And he says, my help was for 3 or 4 weeks putting up ice. And they'd wait the rest of the 11 or 50 or 48 weeks to come back and work again. In some cases. Well, of course, a lot of times there's this, but it just seemed like a lot of his help just was always around to put up ice.
Well, now the outer edges of these buildings, the ice house, were they insulated
Yes.
with sawdust?
That's right, they were, yeah.
Was the roof insulated?
No.
The roof was
No.
not insulated.
No, because they put there's a
Oh, beautiful.
Now, I can remember those men, they were so cold, they had their feet wrapped up with gunny sack. You know,
Sure.
that was cold.
well, there's an ice field.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Cold.
It was scored, you see.
Uh-huh.
That's an ice field that was scored.
Well, now after the ice was in the house,
There's
then in the storage place, it sat there until summer or until such time as it was needed.
That's right.
Now, stores actually had wagons go out delivering ice. didn't they?
Absolutely.
Now, these wagons would have been drawn by 2 horses,
One horse, usually.
1 horse,
Yeah.
They had
and
about 15.
these were large draft horses.
Yes, they were. Every circus that came to town would usually go down there and try to buy some of those horses off of Mr. Storrs.
Well, the ice wagons, now, they had a regular route,
That's right.
and how did they make their presence known? Did they blow a horn? Or
No.
Had cards in the window.
People had to put an ice card in the window.
50 pounds or 25.
There was
or
an
100.
ice card with
And
4,
turn it.
25, 50, 75, and 100. If the 100 was up, they want 100 pounds. If the 75 was up, they want 75. If 50 was up, they wanted 50 pounds. And the people would have to put the cards up in the window.
I'm going to turn this off. I want to see these pictures. The amount of ice that he would get, how much ice would he harvest?
I'd say he harvested roughly between 4,500 to 5,000 tons a year.
There, too.
Practically every year before the dams started to come in the river. And when the dams started in the river, that really spoiled the ice business.
We're talking about the ice, your
Oh.
father's ice house.
House.
So we're back on the air now. So-
Well, the coal and the ice was delivered by horse-driven wagons from door to door.
Well, now, did he own the stores or Gibbons owned the wagons?
Oh, he owned everything.
Stores owned the
Mhm.
wagons.
Yeah, he bought
okay.
in and out.
All right, okay.
He owned,
He owned it with
Uh-huh.
stores.
and then they
Owned
had
by-
these cards, wish I had those, that had like 25 pounds. You put that up, you want 25 pounds or 50 or 100, and you turn that up, and then the driver would stop and bring that in, put it in your refrigerator.
You remember what a 100 pounds of ice would cost?
No, I don't think it cost very much.
Probably about 25 cents.
Or more than that, I think it cost 50 cents.
Do you? 100 pounds?
Yeah, but that, I just don't remember
Yeah.
the prices.
Isn't that awful if you don't know those things? It's too bad.
Do you, whereabouts did the coal come from that he sold? Several different places?
I can tell you all
Yeah,
about the coal.
I know more about that than I do.
I can tell you, when he went into the coal business, he used to get coal from Pennsylvania, hard coal. Then he used to get, of course, Southern Illinois, that was soft coal. He'd get that in here. And practically all the coal that he got at first was lump coal. And then finally the operating company started making a lump coal, and they made a egg coal, what they called an egg coal. It's about a 6x3 or 7x3 size. And these coal companies would run it over screens, just screen it out. And then if you wanted a carload of egg coal, or they had one chute to shoot the egg coal down, and if they wanted, then they finally got into stokers, and then they commenced to making stoker coals, and that's when Mr. Storrs had built that bins, those bins that I was telling you about, to sort out the various sizes of stoker coals.
Well, coal in the early days, I mean, in the period 1910, 20, would sell for what, $6 or $7 a ton?
Oh, less than that. I'd say it'd sell for, well, yeah, it's around $6 a ton. Yeah, and that's delivered in the home.
I also wanted to ask about the competition now. Storrs was the big dealer here, but wasn't there a Haymeyer?
Oh yeah, Ernie. There was about 12 coal companies here at one
Yeah,
time.
we're quite a bit strode.
Well, that was Wilson, Pettibone's nephew,
Yeah.
started one yard. Then Strode bought him out. But there was North Missouri Lumber Company, and then Cliff Broyles, the Hannibal
Yeah,
Coal
there's
Company,
quite a few.
and Ernie Haymeyer.
Competition.
Oh, there was a
Mhm.
dozen coal companies here at one time. Old man O.E. Smith.
Mhm.
He was Paul Storrs, they'd talk to each other and have a big time. And I think just soon one of them turned around and the other like to throw a rock at him.
Real heavy contributors.
Yeah.
But Dad sent four
Mr. Storrs.
children to college.
Mr. Storrs.
He did very well,
at
but
one
then
time had the big coal business.
The
Now,
big-
did we get your brothers and sisters on the tape?
yeah,
He had the picture.
Edna's sisters, just
coal
brothers.
sheds.
Just
There
brothers.
was a
Brothers, we got your brothers
Yeah.
and you. All right.
There was a coal shed, and that was all coal and feed, as I recall, right across the street on Market from where the
It was Rutherford.
Rutherford, and it was in a building that was at such an angle that you always wondered if it was going to be there next time.
Oh, I know what you mean. Uh-huh, I remember that.
Was that the same Haymeyer's? Was that Haymeyer's place?
Rutherford.
Rutherford. What'd you know? Be here all afternoon, nothing happened. So, who's that, honey?
Got your grade school, and then all four of you went through the university?
No.
Just a boy?
No, none of us really
Stuart and George
graduated, but I just went 2 years. I went to Milwaukee Downer School first,
Where was that?
Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And then I went to Gainesville, Georgia Brunel College, the second year. But,
Then the third year you went to my college.
the third year I got married.
Then you really got educated.
Then I got it. Then I got
Well,
it.
I can tell you something about Isabel's brother, Stuart Stores. He was a civil engineer, and he surveyed and laid out the 61 highway from New London down to Troy. And the state engineers didn't make any changes in his survey. They have made it later on, but at that time, the original survey was laid out by Stuart Stores from New London to Troy.
Well,
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Because I know every time
He told me about my family.
Your dad would say, Stuart built this highway, Stuart built this highway.
And he did. And he did. No, I guess that's,
What about the wedding? Where were you married?
we were married in the Trinity Episcopal Church at night, a night wedding.
That was the time that happened.
And
We came up here and had our picture taken in front of the mantelpiece.
it was a big wedding. Had 6 attendants.
She had, what do you have, 5?
Do you remember who your bridesmaids were?
Oh, yeah.
Let's have them.
Oh, well, there's Mildred Stowell, Mildred Walker,
Walker Stillwell.
Virginia Stevenson. Miss Nettie. You've heard of Miss Nettie. League. She was a niece.
All
And
right.
then Mary Virginia Bond, home. And Mildred, we got her, Claire Renlund, and
Lillian Cruikshank.
Lynn Cruikshank.
Mrs. Knight and the
Helen Yule.
Helen Yule. She's a little older. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's it. That was it.
who was the pastor?
Raymond, wasn't he?
Raymond.
What was his first name?
I don't know, he looked like a walrus.
He did look like he looked like one that night too.
Did you have a white dress and veil?
Uh-huh.
And do you still have it?
Yeah. No, I don't
She
have
got
that.
pictures.
I got pictures.
But you didn't-
The veil went to pot, and so the dress, I think. Because it kind of had a metallic thread through it. But I've got pictures.
Did you make your own wedding gown?
No, I bought it in Chicago.
Well, now let's see.
Chicago.
Do we?
What were you doing in Chicago?
Well,
Went up there to shop?
this Virginia Stevenson lived there. She wasn't
Oh.
married, Virginia Hickson. And Mom was glad to have me go attend to it because she didn't want anything to do with it. I mean, she
Yeah.
didn't feel well enough to
Yeah.
do it.
Isabel, there was one thing, we talked a few minutes ago about your working down at the museum,
Mm-hmm.
but you said you worked down there about 20 years,
Almost.
and you went down there to help
Francis.
Bob's
Francis.
sister.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. How did you get started there?
Well, one night...
Did you replace someone, or was it a new assignment?
Well, see, Francis, that's when her husband was still living, Cy. And we were up Quincy one night, and this was after Mom died, and I said, sometimes I think I kind of like a part-time job. And Francis and Cy kind of looked at each other and laughed, and they said, we think you got one, because they'd already talked about hiring me.
Uh-huh.
And when I started working, I think I got 75 cents or 50 cents an hour.
Was Henry, not Henry, but
John Winkler was president.
John Winkler.
John Winkler was president.
President.
But did they have a curator before they had
Francis.
Yeah, they had.
Oh, they had a couple living in the house.
Yeah.
and ran.
Just managed
Yes,
the place.
but I've forgotten their names. Francis would know that.
Yeah. Well,
And all they showed was the parlor.
yeah.
The parlor. They didn't show the whole house.
Okay, now have we covered most of these items here? I
Mhm.
don't want to hurry you, but
No.
if you
Now, wait
got
a
any
minute,
more
there's
on
something
here.
else here that I wanted to ask her especially. About homes and houses and buildings. I was thinking
Oh,
about.
you said something about clothes.
Yeah, fashion.
We always wore hats and gloves to church or to any kind of functions of any kind. And I know when I was to be married, somebody asked Mrs. Harry Morris, she had a really good sense of humor, said, I don't know, I don't have a hat really to wear to Isabel's wedding, and I should, shouldn't I? She said, yes, you should, but she said, you're a Christian Science, so you can just pretend like you got a hat. You just pretend like you got one on. so that was cute. Then my Uncle Ed, now that, I loved him. He really wasn't my uncle. He was by marriage. My mother married Roberta is her name, married Ed Seibel, and he was a clothier down here on Broadway.
He ran a cigar shop first. He owned Seibel Brothers Cigar Shop.
Oh, then he got in a haberdasher. And what I remember about Uncle Ed was he said when he had 25 cents, his mother would send him to the store for 25 cents, and he could buy a steak and a pound of butter and come home with change.
You
Maybe
got
two-
that, didn't you?
Maybe 2 or 3 pennies. Maybe 2 or 3 pennies when he came in.
Then another thing is, he worked down at Robinson's. I guess Robinson's was still there. And he got 75 cents a week going down there after school and working all day Saturday. Then he said he had to fight his way home because there were some thugs in town that were after him because he had that was payday. That was payday. I remember that, but I think those are kind of too cute items. You know, somebody that's just
I don't believe we got the wedding date on the tape.
oh, we were married October the 20th, 1923.
Yeah.
All right. And we'll have our 58th.
Wedding anniversary on October the 20th, 1981.
Coming soon.
Do you have anything else there, Roberta?
Well, yes, I wanted to ask about what you remember about family transportation, besides the stores having ice wagons. Did
Oh.
your family own a carriage?
Yeah, we had a horse, a carriage with a fringe on top.
A kind of a Surrey?
A Surrey. And then we had a two-seater one because Mildred Walker and I used to go riding in it.
Yeah, but you didn't go to take it to school.
And I can remember the first time I ever was in an automobile. The Eichenbergers had one, and they asked us to go for a ride. And I never will forget that.
How'd you feel?
Oh, I just sat up. I sat up like a...
What can you remember about Anna Laura Hawkins Fraser, who was called Becky Thatcher?
Well, the only thing, of course, I was pretty small then. I was going on an errand for my mother down Fifth Street. And I was with somebody, and they said to me, that's Becky Thatcher. And she was sitting on the porch in a rocking chair. And that's all I remember about Becky
From
Thatcher.
what I've read, that may have been the home of her son that she was living there, because she died there on 50th Street.
Was
in
there a son
28.
named Lou Fraser?
Lou Fraser, right.
That's right.
Oh,
Lou
I bet that's
Fraser.
where it was.
Yeah.
About the second house from well, where Riedels, where the photographer is now. Soretti, somewhere along in there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Either that,
right.
That's where she was. Either that house or the next one.
Was the Soretti home the Lou Fraser home? I
That I
just
can't
haven't had
answer.
time to look it up, but
I can't
today,
answer
turn it off. Today I would remember when the home of the Friendless was up here on 6th and Rock.
that. I don't.
I don't.
That was, well, that was a long time ago.
I think, I remember it out being, for the.
On
Cafe.
Levering Avenue.
Yeah,
Levering,
yeah.
yeah.
That's what I remember.
Did either of you have a part in the program on the centennial celebration of Mark Twain, 1935?
We weren't here.
You weren't here. Let's talk about Charles Walker
All
a
right.
little bit. We need some information about him. Tell us about it.
Well,
What did he do? What?
Charlie Walker was a pharmacist. You know, his dad had a drugstore on the south side. Oh, Chris Walker, not Chris Walker, but I forget it. But his dad did a drugstore on the south side, and Charlie Walker was a pharmacist. But he never practiced pharmacy very much. I can remember Charlie Walker riding around Hannibal, more or less, with a great big bulldog sitting up beside him in a car. That's what I can remember Charlie. He had a big bulldog. And how he got into antiques and things, I don't know. But he was just one of the eligible bachelors, and he always remained an eligible bachelor in Hannibal.
Never married.
Never married, no. And
I
they
remember we
lived.
went out to Broadway, and here Mildred and I had an hour to get home and eat lunch, and here we were racing out Broadway. She said, "There goes my cousin Charlie. You think he'd pick us up?" No. Take that dog, but not us.
They were first cousins.
Yeah, first cousin.
First cousin, yeah.
First cousin.
But he.
His father and Charlie's father were brothers.
Well, now he got started in antiques. Did he have a regular antique store?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. How he got in antiques, I don't know. See, there was so much of that period, we were away from here.
Well, now was he related in any way or connected with Winkler?
No,
No.
he just got into this restoration building business down there.
But he restored that all upstairs there at Becky Thatcher.
Yes.
That's your
And the
parlor.
Pilaster House.
Yeah.
The Pilaster
Yeah,
House.
he
That's
did.
all
And the
been-
drugstore and the law
Yeah,
office.
that's right.
He did all of that.
But was somehow or other the impressions that I've had was that he was kind of a loner.
I would say very much.
And I always wondered how he got involved with Winkler on that thing.
Well, I don't think he got involved with Winkler as much as he did with Morris Anderson.
Morris, he did that then when Morris Anderson.
That's
was
right.
there.
That's right.
I see.
That's right.
I see.
And I don't know.
I think Charlie got associated with
And I don't know if
the
he
Mark
was
Twain
paid
area.
so much either. I
Would
don't
you
think
guess-
his salary was.
Would you
most
guess
of
that he got started immediately when the museum was started in 1936?
I would guess so, yes. I would really guess so.
I see. Did Winkler have any other family members, brothers or sisters that you know
Oh, yes.
of? No, I didn't mean Winkler. I meant
Charlie?
Charlie
No,
Walker.
he's
not to my
only
knowledge.
He's the only one.
He was the only son of the Walkers.
And they had a drugstore on the south side.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, some-
That old building is still there. You know, Mr. Walker was a pretty good businessman. One of his businesses was lending money to the Burlington Railroad people at a very high rate of interest. And they'd come in there and borrow money, maybe $10, $12, $15 from him. and he would get at least 25% or better from them. And they'd come in on payday and pay him off. Then a couple of weeks later, they'd come back in there and borrow more money. And he made a lot of his money that way.
Now, this was because the drugstore was close to the Burlington Yard where the men worked.
That's right, the Burlington shop.
Yeah.
And Mr. Walker, he had a good drugstore.
Maybe this is kind of mean, but Charlie was a lot nicer to Mildred Stillwell after she married Walter than she was just Mildred Walker. Her father was a mailman, which is all right, and he was a good mailman. But I think the marriage made a difference, don't you?
I do, definitely, yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, approximately what year did Walker die?
I'd have to call up Smith Undertaking for that.
Well, it would
Well,
have
I'd-
been 10 years, 20 years?
I'd say 10 years ago, yeah.
12 years.
Yeah.
Because we could get his obituary, that might have
Yeah.
something in it.
Yeah.
You know, there might have been something in the paper. I've just never seen, with all the work he did, I have never seen anything where he was given any credit for it.
But you're right.
The only credit that he was ever given was credit that he gave himself with those little plaques that he put.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
right,
glad
too.
he did.
But there's no question but what
Sometimes he
well,
should
he
have had
did,
more.
what I would say, a
Tourists
very
asked
remarkable
about it.
job down
Did it?
there
Yeah,
of
did they?
restoration. And I think that Charlie was quite accurate in his period problem, in the period problem. I think he tried to be.
Do you know of any special piece of furniture in the museum that came from a special place that you think there's a nice story behind it?
No.
Or anything over in the home?
No, that, he knew that.
Uh-huh. That's
And
what would
he
be
made no
so
record especially
interesting
of
to
that.
know. But you don't think there'd be any papers any place where he kept a record of who he got those things from?
I don't think so.
Well, you see, then they
used to
didn't-
have board meetings and keep minutes or anything.
Well,
It
they
was
didn't
awful.
have income tax write-offs then either.
That's right. And John
Because he was
John
like-
never had meetings like they do
He got
now.
the thing off,
No, it's on.
turned off.
Uh,
Sometimes when I was working in the museum,
Walker lived where now?
On the southwest corner, upstairs of the building on the southwest corner of Broadway and 7th Street.
but first he lived
That's
on
where the
7th
old,
Street.
that's where the bank is now. Southwest corner,
the-
7th Street.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Commerce, the
Yeah.
Commerce Bank,
They tore
yeah.
that down.
Yeah.
But he used to live on 7th Street.
Well, yeah, his home was on
Oh,
Center
yeah.
Street, right
Yeah.
next to the Davidsons' home.
Yeah.
We
where-
have that house, that green,
Uh-huh.
olive green.
That's where his
And you know, I
father
was a
did.
good friend of Charlie's, and I liked to play bridge with her.
He was a
But
good
he
bridge
did
player.
have that affliction.
Well, let me ask you a question. There's a house on the corner of Magnolia and Center Street that a man named Brown supposedly had built. And it's got a little kind of a cupola that goes upstairs, 3 stories high. And it's got beautiful stairway going up.
You don't mean...
Maple at Center.
Maple and
Maple Center.
Yeah,
You mean the house on the corner?
the house on the corner.
Well, that's the house at, which corner?
It
It would
was
be
called
on
Quirk.
the southeast corner.
First,
Southeast corner. That's Louis Quirk's house.
oh, yeah, Willie Quirk.
That was the old Quirk family. Well, he was a railroad man.
Well, now they have a beautiful stairway in that, and I've always been a little curious about that stairway and the construction of that building.
You know, there's a possibility that my grandfather could have built that stairway because that was his specialty. And you know where Reverend Trevathan lives? On the corner of Trevathan. On the corner of Center and 10th, the southeast corner. There's a stairway in that house that Granddad
And all
built.
the flowers out.
Granddad, that was his specialty. And porches was another one of his specialties.
Let me ask you a different sort of a question.
the railroad strike in 1921-22.
I
Were
remember
you folks living here at that
I
time?
was, yes, I remember she was too.
Of course, you know, I was here, but I was totally uninvolved. I was too young to be concerned at all
Yeah.
about the thing. But that strike left quite a mark on Hannibal.
Yes, it
apparently.
did.
And can you tell us something about that strike?
Only thing I know that it was a strike, and the Burlington Railroad finally just moved most of its shops out of here up to Galesburg. It just moved them out, and that strike hurt Hannibal, I would say, as much as anything. You know, Hannibal is really a very, very fine, small city.
Oh, okay, that ends.
And it still was even after, but it was just Hannibal was just a great city to live in.
So
Wonderful.
it was 1894.
Businesses were owned by residents of Hannibal. There wasn't any change here at all tonight. But when that strike came, why, it just created a sort of a vacuum or something. And from that time on, Hannibal wasn't the same. There's bound to be anything like that happened. This was really a fine locality. That's why they called me Hannibal Hogg when I was traveling.
I don't know why I didn't buy one.
I talked about it. I
One of the
just
lowest numbers.
liked it.
Suzanne Jones came over.
I liked, but you
The little
know,
boy next door was.
later on this
Downtown. And Boston's.
politics have hurt everybody in my estimation. And I see, but shut it off.
Couple of questions. In the stories about the streetcars of Hannibal, do you have any particular memories of streetcars?
Very much.
Tell us about.
Well, I of course remember the original old streetcar line that ran from Mount Olivet Cemetery down around South Main Street, up Broadway, down Broadway,
But they were.
finally went out to Oakwood, and finally went out a branch line out at Market Street, branched off and went out to St. Mary's Avenue. On Broadway, between right around 5th Street and 6th Street, there was a double track where the cars used to pass each other. Single track the rest of the way. And there's the same thing over on the south side, where the cars that went over to Mount Olivet Cemetery would have to wait till the other car came. They were all timed, and they'd have to wait so they could pass. And then they ran on a single rail. In the summertime, they had open cars, and that's when we used to have more fun going on trolley rides. Some church or some school or some organization would get up a trolley ride, and it cost us maybe 15 cents, something like that. And we ride over to Mount Olivet Cemetery and back, and out to Oakwood and back, and then maybe go to have an ice cream parlor or something, have some ice cream. That's what I remember about the streetcar. And the thing I remember about them, especially when I was playing baseball, I dressed at home, I went down, got on the streetcar, and it didn't cost me a penny.
They'd let you ride free.
Ride free. If I had on my civilian clothes, it would cost me a nickel.
Tell us a little bit about Saturday nights in Hannibal.
Well, that was the times when we used to go on our dates and our dancing and things like that, just our regular, we'd have a date during a week, but sometimes. But Saturday night, I know as youngsters, Dad always used to take us downtown. And we'd go downtown, that's when he bought us our shoes or our clothes or something like that.